but they've just repackaged a whole bunch of body positivity and fat acceptance talking points and then put it in a book for teens and preteens. Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Katie, and for those of you who don't know me, I used to weigh 360 pounds, and I've lost 180 pounds and kept it up for years now. And on this channel, we will discuss weight loss, weight maintenance, nonsense I see online about body positivity and fat acceptance, my experiences with all of that, and, well, anything else I feel like talking about. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below, and let's get into today's video. So today, I have something just a bit different for us. Last week on my community tab, I did put up a poll and asked what subject I should cover next. And overwhelmingly, you all asked to see TESS Holliday'S new book.
Miss Tess Rocket!
So obviously, I did pick it up. Yes, I have read it. And yes, I have plenty of thoughts about it. So let's just go ahead, dive on in. I will give you my thoughts along the way. And be sure to stick around to the very end for a bonus story time. So as you may have heard, our friend Tess Holliday has put out a book. And well, why don't we just let her describe it in her own words?
This is my new book, Take Up Space, y'all. It's out August 26th. It's for teens and tweens. You pre-order it in my bio. And this is a self-love book for anyone that needs advice on how to love themselves from the inside out. And I'm so incredibly proud of it.
So our friend did write a bold and bright guide to self-love, or at least co-authored it with Kelly Kuhn as well. And well, I'll be perfectly honest, I have never done a book review on here before. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with the things generally about the book, and then we'll go ahead and get into the nitty-gritty details. And, well, not to bury the lead, I did not care for this book. Now, I do understand that I am not the intended audience for this. It's meant for teens and potentially preteens, but we'll get into that in just a little bit. So clearly, I am not a teenager, but I do have kids of my own. I have a 9-year-old and I have a 10-year-old. And so I approached this book curious to see if there was any advice in here that I would want to pass on to my own kids. And, well, this is going to lead me straight to our first point. Well, within just a couple of minutes of receiving this book, I started leafing through it to see what it was all about. And I realized very quickly it's broken up into two parts. The first part, love your outer self. Then the second part is going to be love your inner self. So I find it rather ironic that our friend, who has essentially made her career off of F your beauty standards, when she had the opportunity to write a bold and bright guide to self-love, the very first thing that she wanted included in this book, the first thing that you would open up to see, love your outer self. Essentially telling people that this is the most important part. That's why it's in the front, right? I mean, I understand that we get to part 2 and love your inner self, but that kind of goes against everything I personally believe in. I believe that your outer beauty is a reflection of your inner beauty, and it doesn't really do much good to work on your outer self if you haven't addressed the things inside first. So that kind of goes against everything that I have actually taught my kids already. They know that, yes, they can express themselves however they wish. They can dress however they want. I mean, obviously, within reason, they do have to have pants on when they leave the house, right? But, they can dress how they want. They can choose their hairstyles and choose how they wear their hair. All sorts of things like that, right? But they'll be the first to tell you that what matters is on the inside. And that if they change the way they look on the outside, they're still going to be the same people on the inside. So that was the first thing that I saw when I opened this book. And I mean, I have to be honest, given our friend's track record, I'm not really surprised. I was really annoyed, but I wasn't surprised because despite the fact she has built her entire career off of F your beauty standards, it's been very clear to so many of us for a very long time the only beauty standard she's saying F you to is what? Body standards or weight standards? So that would be much more appropriate for her to say F your weight standards. Because she adheres to every other beauty standard, and clearly she thinks it's so important it belongs in the front of the book. So it just, again, not surprised, just really annoyed, and especially like the first thing I saw when I opened this book. So it definitely did not set me up to anticipate this being a good read for me personally. And then that's going to lead me to the next thing that I noticed about this book. So as I mentioned before, it is broken up into 2 parts. And then within each part, you're going to have different chapters. And then at the end of each chapter, you're going to have like different quizzes and maybe writing prompts or discussion questions, just things to kind of tie up what was talked about in each chapter. And as I was reading through this, I couldn't help but notice just how familiar that format felt to me. And I'll be perfectly honest, I didn't really do any research on this book before I picked it up. I just put up the poll on my community tab, and you guys said that you wanted me to read this, and I ordered it. So that was about all the research I really had done on this book, to be perfectly fair. But after finishing reading the book, I did look up some of the press that was being put out surrounding it, and it does appear that this formatting style and choice was intentional. And finally, about a third of the way through the book, it dawned on me. It felt like I was reading an issue of 17 from the 90s. And I have to be honest, that's not my favorite formatting choice, personally. I didn't even really care for it then, but I care for it even less now. And that would definitely not be my preference for how I would have formatted this book. Because within each chapter, it's essentially set up like an article out of the magazine. And then these quizzes very much remind me of those style of quizzes that you could find in fashion magazines and teen magazines back in the day. And the reason that I have so many issues with that, well, first off, with the subject matter that is being dealt with in this book, which we'll get into a little bit more a little later in the video, I really felt like there were a lot of topics that deserved a lot more of a deep dive than what could be done in this article style format. There were a lot of issues that were addressed that were just barely touched upon the surface. And for what they were trying to cover in here, I feel like so much of it just kind of fell short and missed the mark. And then we get to those quizzes, which I have to be honest, again, I am just not personally a fan of. And not just in this book, but just kind of in general. You know, back when I was reading 17 in the 90s when I had my subscription, didn't really care for him then. Wasn't necessarily a big fan of all the BuzzFeed quizzes, like about 10 years or so ago when they were really popular. And then again, the quizzes in this book as well. And I get that most of them are just supposed to be silly little quizzes that you aren't supposed to overthink, right? Well, again, with some of the subject matter that's covered in this book, sometimes getting to a silly little quiz at the end of that felt kind of jarring. And the other thing that's always kind of just rubbed me the wrong way with these quizzes, it's kind of like my pattern recognition just will not allow me to enjoy them. Because it was really easy for me to figure out how all of these quizzes have always worked. They start with the answers. They start with where you will end up. And then they formulate all the questions to help direct you and funnel you into their prescribed choices that they've already come up with. So knowing that, and knowing that these quizzes were meant to help people find their personal style or figure out who they are, and all these things that are very personalized to the individual, I felt like these just general type quizzes really, again, missed the mark for me. And I couldn't help but notice so many times I'm reading through these quizzes. And again, not just in this book, but in general, right? And I'd read through a list of choices, like which one describes you the best. And I'll read through 5 or 6 choices, and none of them described me. Not even close. Maybe there was like one that might have one similarity, or I guess if I had to pick one, that one sounds the least terrible to me, I guess. And when you're doing that over and over again in these quizzes, and then you get to the end and they tell you, this is who you are. I have to admit, so many times when I was a teenager reading these types of quizzes and going through this type of information in 17, I felt left out. I felt like I obviously must not belong because it's not even a choice on this quiz. And don't feel too badly for me. I mean, I figured out really early on that it was okay to just be me and I didn't have to fit in or try to conform to whatever they were trying to direct me towards. But I understand that that is a struggle for a lot of teenagers, a lot of preteens, a lot of tweens, a lot of the people that this book is marketed towards. That's obviously why she wanted to write this book, right? And so I just found that tool in this book to be, again, really off-putting and just missed the mark for me. And it just kind of felt like the way this was all set up and formatted, even down to the language and the vocabulary used in here. It felt so much like they were trying to talk to a teenager like they are a teenager, when clearly they're not.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?
Ahoy there, Dean. I understand you're taking suggestions from students, eh?
And so I can understand that style might bring some nostalgia for some people, absolutely. But it definitely did not for me. And with this formatting style, it led me to a question that I'm not really sure I even found the answer to yet. And that question is, what ages is this book intended for? And the reason that I ask that, well, when I read 17 back in the 90s, I didn't read it at 17. I read it at like 10, 11, 12 years old, trying to imagine what my life might be like at 17, right? And then by the time I was 17, I had moved on and I was reading Cosmo and Glamour and other more adult magazines, trying to envision what my life would be like as an adult. So the fact that they have chosen this style of formatting, they have further reading in the back starting at 8 years old. That does make me wonder, do they think that this is for preteens as well as teens? Because I know our friend said in her own words that this was for teens and tweens. I know that when I looked it up online, I saw a lot of marketing that said it was for teens.
I always see, and I'm the mother of two boys who are teenagers, and I have nieces.
And when I picked this up off of Amazon, it was for ages 12 and up, I believe. But yet again, the formatting and the further reading in the back would indicate to me that they think younger kids might be picking this up as well. And again, I have a 9-year-old and a 10-year-old, so that does make me really wonder, who was this intended for? And I mean, don't get me wrong, as their parent, I obviously can read this and decide if this is a good book, whether or not they should. And don't get me wrong, as their parent, I can read this book and I can make this decision for myself, whether or not it's appropriate for my child to read this book. But I found it really curious that they keep promoting it to teens or occasionally mention tweens. But yet I did find further reading in the back for up to 8 years old. And the reason that stuck out to me, I mean, if you have kids or you've been around kids, there's a huge difference between all of those ages, between 8 years old, between 12 years old, between 16. There is a huge difference between each and every one of those ages, including all the ones in between. So the advice that I would give an 8-year-old would be much different than the advice that I would give to a 12-year-old, and much different than the advice that I would give to a 16-year-old. Even if it's all the same subject, even if the outcome would be relatively the same, the way that I would approach it, the way that I would talk about it, the depth that I could get into with my kids, that all depends on their ages and where they're at developmentally. So the fact that I feel like they're trying to cover this broad age range, that really stuck out to me. And it also then made me question some of the advice that is in here. And again, we'll get into the nitty-gritty here in just a moment. But again, I did not care for the formatting, and I feel like this formatting skews just a little bit younger than teens, or at least it always did back when I was reading 17. And that's going to lead us to my final generalized critique on this book. And I think this one is probably the most egregious and makes me more upset than all the rest combined, if I'm being perfectly fair. There are no sources in this book We have a QR code we could scan and apparently some websites we could go to, but there's no printed listed sources anywhere in this book. Oh, I take that back. There is one section in here where, let's see. Oh, here we are. We have a table right here that does have the sourcing right underneath it. It's the only example in the book where it is properly sourced, which indicates to me that it can be done. But that was a choice to not put any sources in here and just put a QR code back here. And I mean, like, let's be fair. We have room back here for these decorative pages, but not sources. I just think that's so incredibly lazy, and I cannot understand how a self-help book, a nonfiction book, can be printed without the sources. I mean, I know I could go and try to look these up, absolutely, but let's be fair. Who's actually going to take the time to do that? Especially if this is being marketed towards teens, potentially preteens down to 8 years old. You're not even going to give them the information right there in front of their own eyes. Nope, we have to go through all this technology and all these hoops just to get what should have been in this book. Sources. Okay, I think I got that out of my system. I think. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into some of the nitty-gritty details, and I'll give you some examples as to why I did not have a good time with this book. Okay, so sprinkled throughout this whole book, there are interviews between our good friend Tess and the other author, Kelly Kuhn. And this very first question that starts off the entire book, I kind of feel like it encapsulates and summarizes absolutely everything that we are about to go through together. Hey, Tess. Thanks for taking some of your incredibly busy time handling life like a boss to write this book with me. I'm honored and thrilled, aka screaming, crying, and all the starry-eyed reactions. Will you introduce yourself to our lovely readers? Tell us a few things about what makes you, you. To which Tess responded, I'm so bad at talking about myself. Really, friend? Now, why do you keep going on speaking tours and doing TEDx talks and going and speaking to the UN and doing interviews and going on morning shows and writing books? This is not her first book. She's written another book all about her life. It just rubbed me the wrong way right off the get-go because it just sets it up for how self-serving this book is about to be. And then we move on to the first chapter, which, of course, reminder, this is in the Love Your Outer Self section. So now we're going to learn all about clothing. Because again, the very first thing that you should learn when you're learning to love yourself is clothes. Okay. When Tess was growing up, there weren't that many plus-size clothing options for teenagers. One of the only stores that even sold stuff in her size was Lane Bryant, which would have been great if she wanted to look like a 13-year-old bank teller. So when I read that, that absolutely stuck out like a sore thumb to me. Because, well, Tess and I are roughly about the same age. I mean, despite what our friend thinks and tries to tell people.
I mean, I get mistaken all the time for a much younger, lady, but I always say that it's the cheeseburger grease that fills me out. For so long. I had somebody, on social media recently tell me that I would never make it to 30. And my response to them was about 2 seconds. And it said, babe, I'm 39. I'm 39. Google's I know free. I don't look like it.
Our friend is 39. And, well, I'm 41, about to be 42 in the next week or so. So we are of the same era. And I graduated high school in 2001, just for reference. And, well, Tess has shared numerous pictures of herself as a teenager during that time. So here's Tess as a teenager. And here I am as a teenager. We look pretty similar in size. As a matter of fact, I believe she said in one of her interviews or her books, or Lord knows where she said it at this point because she's been in the public eye for so long. But I definitely recall her saying that she wore like a 14 or maybe even a 16 in high school. So we were roughly the same size. Actually, I was a size 20 to a 22 when I graduated high school. So the notion that we only had Lane Bryant to shop at, that simply wasn't accurate, at least for me. While I understand we might not have had all the options that are available now, we definitely had more than Lane Bryant. Again, at least I know I had way more available to me. We had Deb, we had Fashion Bug, we had Target, we had Old Navy, or where most of my clothes came from high school, the JCPenney catalog. And let's be fair, that wasn't necessarily my personal choice either, but not only did I need a size 14, 16, or maybe 18, 20, I'm also 5'9". So I always need tall pants. So if I wanted jeans that were long enough, I basically had to order them from the catalog. So I know that we had more options than what she just listed at Lane Bryant. And coincidentally, not long after I graduated high school in 2001, I started working for Lane Bryant. I worked there for several years as manager. And well, when I started working there, we were actually in the middle of a transition period. So the history of Lane Bryant, I could go over in an entirely separate video if you wanted to. But suffice it to say, by about the mid to late 90s, Lane Bryant had been bought up by the Limited. And they had changed out quite a bit of the inventory that Lane Bryant had carried for decades, basically at that point. That's when they went through and got rid of tunics and leggings and stirrups and muumuus, all of the things that people had grown to equate with Lane Bryant. They had taken almost all of that out of the stores, and they had brought in a lot more youthful and trendy clothing, trying to make it the plus size Limited. And then by the time I got hired in the early to mid 2000s, we were sold off again, and they were essentially trying to do damage control from what the Limited had done, because they had really kind of pissed off a lot of their core customers by trending so youthful and so trendy. But even during that transition period when I worked there, I found plenty of clothes to wear when I was like 19, 20, 21 years old, and I did not look like a bank teller. I was able to find lots of outfits there. As a matter of fact, when I worked at Lane Bryant, that was when I got the most compliments ever on my wardrobe, because I always had something new because I had my discount and I was always trying to wear new clothes to work, right? So that just did not line up at all for me and really stuck out like a sore thumb. And this next passage, well, it's still from the same chapter, so we're still going to be talking about clothing. Keep that in mind. The thing is, looking different from how you look right now, or achieving some sort of physical milestone, being bigger, thinner, stronger, taller, curvier, shorter? How does one achieve being shorter? Did they just take off their high heels? How does one achieve that? Etc. will not change how you feel inside, even though you might think it's the key to happiness. It isn't. People tend to have a general happiness baseline where they hang out on the sad to happy spectrum. The second we hit whatever physical milestone we think we need to achieve to finally be happy, we get a boost of excitement, which lasts a couple of days. But then we do this awful thing and adapt to our new normal. Boo! We settle back into our baseline happiness state, and then we have to hit a brand new goal to get that little burst of excitement again. And again, just a reminder, this passage came from a chapter all about clothing. Tess felt it necessary to lecture us that changing our body was not going to make us happy. And I have to be honest, that does not line up with my experience whatsoever. So it's been a little over 9 years since I've lost the weight, and at least personally, each and every single time I can do something that I wasn't able to do at my heaviest, I still get that burst of excitement. Each and every single time. Every time I bend over and tie my shoes, I get that burst of excitement. It feels wonderful to tie my shoes and not feel like I'm getting sawed in half. Each and every time I sit in my car and get behind the steering wheel and it's not wedged into my stomach, I'm really excited by that, honestly. Each and every single time I go for a walk and I'm not winded just from walking out the door, and then I can walk for miles and miles and miles. I'm really excited. I promise you, I am so excited the whole way through. And I understand that that might not be everybody's experience. And I do understand that if you are seeking out happiness through these things, you might not find it. But the idea that achieving a goal isn't going to make you happy was just absolutely mind-boggling to me. So, prime example, I just did a 5K a little over a week ago, and it was the Goodyear Heights 5K. And so much fun. We had a gorgeous morning, beautiful weather, and it was the first time that they were doing this race, so we all got to try out the course for the first time. And I gotta say, that was a really, really fun course. It was unlike any other course that I had done throughout the season. Most of them are pretty level. There might be a few increases in elevation and a few decreases here and there, but nothing too out of the ordinary. They try to keep it pretty level so that way everybody of every ability can try to participate in these races, right? Well, this race, we start off going 1.5 miles straight up one of the most infamous hills in all of Akron. 1.5 miles up this hill. It might level off just a little bit at intersections here and there, but then you're going right back up. And by the time you get to the top of the hill, it was such an achievement. They actually had somebody at the top of the hill welcoming you to the top of the hill and letting you know that the rest of the course was going to be all downhill and really super fast.
Good morning. Welcome to the top of the hill.
Morning. But once I got to the top of the hill and I realized, oh, I made it to the top of the hill. That's when I realized, wow, I just did that without stopping. I obviously am going to keep going. I feel fabulous. I am not out of breath. This is wonderful. This is something I could not have achieved at 360 pounds. There is no way I could have ever done anything like that at my heaviest. And admittedly, not just because of the weight. For those of you that don't know, I dealt with a really terrible ankle injury for a really long time, for a little over 10 years, actually. So I tore 2 tendons, 2 ligaments, tore a bunch of cartilage. They had to go in there, reshape some of my bones. It was a whole process. And then they let me hobble around for like 10.5 years before I got an MRI and finally got a surgery and then had to relearn how to walk. I mean, it was a whole thing. So not just losing weight, but also getting that ankle fixed. And again, that was not lost on me at all in that moment. As a matter of fact, I don't even really remember the second half of the race. I was just in my own head saying, I can't believe I did this. I can't believe I did it. I know that I can do these things, but each and every single time I do it, I'm just still blown away and I can't believe I did it because for so long I couldn't. For so long I could not do these things that now that I can, yes, reaching that physical milestone, it always brings me that burst of excitement. And even just thinking about it, just talking about it with you guys, I'm excited. I can't wait for my next race in a couple of weeks, like legitimately. So this idea that you're going to get this burst of happiness, it's going to go away. And then all the hard work that you just did was basically for nothing. That really rubbed me the wrong way. And again, not at all my experience. And then the next couple of chapters are about taking care of your face. So like skincare, makeup, things like that, taking care of your hair. And most of it was fairly benign, but I did notice a lot of product placement in this book. Direct brand recommendations in here. Not if you have this type of hair, look for these types of products, but use this specific product. So I did kind of wonder about that, if there was like compensation from these brands to be included in this book that just maybe wasn't disclosed, because I did find it rather curious because again, for a book that's for teens and at least according to the further reading in the back, 8-year-olds, why are we giving direct recommendations? When again, I wouldn't recommend the same things for an 8-year-old as I would for a 16-year-old. So again, I did notice the amount of product placement that was sprinkled throughout this book. And then we get to the end of the hair care section. We did have a little section on nails that I want to go over here. And I mean, just for reference, I am definitely not a professional when it comes to nails. I am very much an amateur enthusiast. I love doing nails, but I only do my own and I know what I know, and that's literally about it. But again, I am very much an enthusiastic amateur. So I try to keep up on what I can. I try to look up what I can. And even though I am definitely not an expert, I do try to listen to the advice that the experts are giving, if that makes any sense. Okay, so we have keep them dry and clean. Yep, absolutely. Use a little scrub brush or sterilized toothbrush to get under the edges. Please don't use a sterilized toothbrush. I can't imagine that most teenagers or preteens in the first place would know how to properly sterilize a toothbrush, but also nail brushes are like 99 cents, $1.25 at the Dollar Tree. I think even Ulta has one for like maybe 99 cents, $1.99. I've picked up some really inexpensive ones up there over the years. Sally's has really inexpensive ones as well. Walmart. I mean, so many places carry really cheap nail brushes. I would definitely suggest getting the proper tool to do the job, because I can tell from personal experience there is a big difference in the bristles between my toothbrush and the nail brush. And it was rather curious to me that we have all of the product placement in here, like Super Goop sunscreen, but when it came to a nail brush, they were offering an alternative that I could see going sideways really fast, especially again, talking for teenagers and preteens. And then we get to, if you wear acrylics, gels, dips, or press on nails, take a break between manicures. Acrylics? Acrylics? Now, again, I am not a professional. And I know Tess is not a nail tech, but she is a makeup artist. And I feel like she would have learned way better than this, or at least I would have hoped. Because everything that I can find online and everything I have ever heard when it comes to acrylics, and that's going to include the dip as well, because that's just acrylic in a different form, it's not recommended for anyone under 16. You should not even be starting acrylics until you are 16 years old. That is not mentioned in here at all. The book that is meant for teens, tweens, evidently preteens down to maybe 8 years old, they're talking about acrylics in here, but not actually giving them the proper information on this. So I am genuinely surprised that that made it in here. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be, because F your beauty standards, right? Who cares if 10-year-olds are wearing acrylics? And believe me, I love nails. I absolutely do. And I think it's totally fine to do whatever you want on your own body. But when we are talking about things that have age requirements for safety reasons, I am genuinely surprised that it wasn't even mentioned in here. It just says, take a break in between. Like, that's going to solve putting acrylics on a 12-year-old when their nail plate isn't fully formed. I was honestly incredibly shocked to see this in this book, especially because, again, there's no sources back here, so I can't tell where they actually got that information from unless I want to go on a scavenger hunt. So then we get to the next section, which I've been thinking quite a bit about how I was going to talk about or address it on here, because the next section is called Feed Me. And it's going to talk about subjects that would typically get me demonetized on here. But it is important to address what she has brought up in here. So typically when I talk about this, I try to allude to these subjects, or I will use different lingo to try to get around it. And I'll be honest, with what we're about to get into, I don't think I'm going to be able to keep up with my own lingo, let alone anyone else who doesn't know this lingo. So we're just going to talk about it how it is, and then I'm going to have to try to clean this up in editing, and fingers crossed this doesn't come back to bite me in the ass. And this next section is about food, and we've got 5 fast facts about food. So let's go and check one out. Food, is it morally good or bad? That's not a fact about food. That's a fat acceptance talking point. And when I hear people talking about food being good or bad, I don't hear them talking about it in that context, whether it's morally good or morally bad. It's more along the lines of, is that food that is good for you? Is it nutritious? Is it going to make you feel good to eat that food? Or is it junk food? Is there no nutrition there? Is it just a whole bunch of empty calories? That's what I hear when I hear people talking about food being good or bad. Not food being morally good or morally bad. So I can't say I'm surprised that I found a fat acceptance talking point in Tess's book, but let's go ahead and see what else we've got. Food is fuel. The cells inside our body are so needy. They really are. Ugh. They're in constant demand of energy, and that energy comes from food, no matter what type of food that is. Once again, reinforcing this idea that it doesn't matter if your food has nutrients in it or not, whether or not it's junk food or nutritious food. There's apparently no difference. And I'm not surprised whatsoever that that was in this book, because hasn't our friend said similar things in the past, that your body can't tell the difference between food? Like, if you eat an apple or a slice of pizza, your body can't tell the difference, or something like that. And that's just so laughable to me. It's unreal. Your body absolutely can tell the difference. It absolutely can. If you just know even a little bit about digestion and how that works inside your body's going to release certain hormones and enzymes depending on what type of food you have consumed. How does your body know to put insulin into your system? Because it detected the sugar. So, of course, your body can tell the difference between foods. It knows what you're eating, and then it can break it down from there. But if your body didn't know what you were eating, it wouldn't be able to break it down so efficiently. So that doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever, that it doesn't matter what type of food it is, and it's not morally good and morally bad. This is all just mental gymnastics to try to get around saying the thing that we all know to be true, that certain foods are better for us to eat. Other foods are more of a treat that we should have in moderation, or maybe not even all that much at all. But she can't bring herself to say this at all. And again, no sources for this, not readily available sources. And when we are talking about things like this and what we are about to get into, again, I am just absolutely flabbergasted that there are no sources listed whatsoever, when clearly they showed they could do it if they had really wanted to. But let's go ahead and move on to this next section, which is disordered eating. Because, of course, our friend feels she is qualified enough to talk about this. And not just talk about this, but talk about this to teenagers and preteens who are in very critical times of their lives when it comes to this subject matter. But let's go ahead and see what Tess has to say about this, because, of course, she included an entire section about her own. Tess was diagnosed with atypical sclerosis in 2020, though her disordered eating started around age 10. She pinpoints one moment when she believes it began. After a family tragedy that left her mother disabled, Tess was at her aunt's house eating a bowl of Campbell's vegetable beef soup with saltine crackers. Tess put a few crackers into the soup, then a few more, and before long, she'd eaten the entire sleeve of saltines. It filled me up, she says. I felt full. She felt comforted. Now, I am no professional whatsoever, but I have had my own struggles. And I have been very open and honest about my struggles on this channel, and my struggles have never been with restriction. They've always been with binging. And when I read this passage, my jaw hit the floor. This is textbook. She ate the entire sleeve of crackers to feel comforted and to feel full. I know that feeling. I could relate so incredibly hard. And even though mine was Campbell's tomato soup, I can understand that feeling completely. And no, it's not atypical anorexia. It's binge disorder. And many of us have been screaming this for years at this point, that there is absolutely no way that she has whatever she claims she has. Because not only does she not meet the diagnostic criteria, which we'll get into in just a moment, but also we can see the signs. Those of us that have gone through it, game recognizes game. Every single time. It's like watching somebody in the throes of addiction, trying to tell a former addict, I'm fine. I'm totally cool. I've got it all under control. When anybody who's been in that situation knows, no, they're not fine. They're not cool. They don't have it all under control, because we have been exactly where they were. And when I read this passage, it essentially confirmed that to me, because, oh my goodness, have I actually found something I can relate to our friend with. right there. At least I am willing to admit what it is. And I didn't sit there and let other people try to tell me, no, it's not that. It can't be that. Because I know the reality of what I did to myself. I did not get to 360 pounds by skipping meals. I did not get to 360 pounds by not eating. I got to 360 pounds by overeating, and by overeating a lot, and by overeating a lot to compensate for what I was feeling emotionally. I was in massive depression after my dad passed away. And then I found myself married to somebody that was not a good fit for me, got married way too young, ended up in a really shitty marriage for a minute. That contributed to a lot of my depression too. A job that I absolutely hated and felt like I was never going to get out of, that contributed to it too. So I used food for comfort. And when you're using food for comfort, and you're using food to the point of fullness for comfort, I know exactly what that means. Or at least I know exactly what that meant for me. And everybody else that I have ever spoken to with the very same condition that I have, we pretty much all can relate to that passage right there. And then she does speak about how she got diagnosed in 2020 with what she claims she has. But let's go ahead and see what else she has written about this. Fans and other people online 100% did not like hearing that Tess had an eating disorder. No, it wasn't that she has an eating disorder. It's that she's telling people she has one that she doesn't have. She's telling people that she has a different one than she has. It's not that she has an eating disorder that's the problem. The problem is she is putting out dangerous misinformation, especially to vulnerable individuals. After pressing send on her infamous tweet that explained her diagnosis, trolls all over the web claimed she was a liar, which was strange because she didn't remember any of them being in the doctor's office when she was diagnosed. Anyway, that comment belonged online to your trolls, Tess, not in a book aimed towards teens talking about a very serious subject. Many times throughout this book, I found it to be very self-serving, and that was one of them. She exists in a bigger body than some people. Wow, that some is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. And remember, body size is not an indicator of a person's relationship with food. And then we've got a little blurb down here about what Tess's particular situation is. What is a typical anorexia? It's a psychological disorder, just like anxiety or depression, that comes chock full with a bunch of mental and emotional distress. In fact, because the only difference between atypical anorexia and typical anorexia is body weight, those with the atypical kind have bodies that are not medically underweight. The distress related to eating and body image can be pretty darn bad, and the risks associated are the exact same. Also, atypical anorexia is much more common than anorexia. The prevalence of diagnosed atypical anorexia by age 20 is triple that of those diagnosed with anorexia. So, did anybody actually figure out what this is just based off of what I read? Because this is supposed to be the answer to the question, and yet, if I hadn't looked this up prior to this, I would have no clue what this actually was. I would have absolutely no clue. And again, this is made for teens and preteens and tweens, right? And it assumes they already know what anorexia is, and that the only difference is that you're not medically underweight when you started losing weight. And what this conveniently does is ignore one of the main criteria to get diagnosed with either one. There has to be significant weight loss. Just because you started at a larger body, you still have to have the weight loss in order to get this diagnosis with either one of them. There has to be significant weight loss. And I mean, this is Tess on tour right now promoting this book just within the last week. And this is Tess in 2020 when she came out with her diagnosis. And I mean, I know my eyes are not the greatest, but I don't see any significant weight loss between the two. As a matter of fact, I see significant weight gain. So I guess maybe we should all be congratulating our friend here. She's done it. She beat it. Clearly, this is not an issue for her any longer because she doesn't have one of the main diagnostic criteria that you need to get diagnosed with this disorder. So the fact that she is still continuing on 5 years later when we all have eyes is just utterly astounding to me. I mean, I guess she does have commitment to the bit, but sheesh. The fact that this ended up in a book for teens talking about very serious subject matter, and I'm over here having to point out how much weight our friend has gained in the last 5 years because it is so incredibly obvious to anyone who has eyes that she does not have what she claims she has. But don't worry, our friend has a list of signs that you or a friend might need to talk to a professional about food. So let's check out a couple of these. We have fixating on meals, calories, protein, fat content, and so on. What does she mean by fixating? Because in many cases, it could just be an awareness, and people will try to accuse you of having these issues. So what do they mean by fixating? Are they trying to push orthorexia as being a thing? Because it's not a recognized eating disorder. Even in the list of eating disorders she has listed here, she actually didn't put it in there. I'm pleasantly surprised. But what does it mean to fixate in her mind? I'm kind of curious about that. So I understand that, yes, if we take things to extremes, then yes, that can be a problem no matter who you are, no matter what the subject matter is. We really don't want to take things to extremes, right? But given what we have just read and knowing our friend, I'm genuinely curious what she means by fixating on. But then we have not allowing yourself to eat freely, which not a fan of the way that's worded because it almost sounds like she is trying to promote intuitive eating, which I've talked about on here before and was definitely not a good fit for me. I know plenty of other people who have said it was not a good fit for them. And especially if you are in recovery for certain conditions like binge eating, it's probably not going to be a good fit for a lot of people because many of us do need to be aware or maybe even track what we are eating. And so this idea that we have to eat freely is not going to work well with what we need to do for our recovery. And then the other thing, just the way that this is worded, there are so many people out there that have allergies or food restrictions because they just don't want to get sick, right? I mean, so if I were to read this and interpret this literally, I don't allow myself to eat freely. Why? Because I'm lactose intolerant. And you're damn Skippy, I miss ice cream. I absolutely miss ice cream. But I know if I eat it, I'm going to be sick for like 3 to 5 business days. And more often than not, it's just not worth it for me. So as much as I miss ice cream, I also enjoy not getting sick. So I will tell myself, hey, I'm not going to have the ice cream today. That sounds really awesome. I really want it. But also, I don't want to get sick. But this idea that if you're not allowing yourself to eat freely, then that must be a problem. I really don't like the way that's worded because there really are valid reasons why people might want to keep track of what they're eating. So I really don't like the way that this is worded, knowing we have so many people who do have to be mindful about what they eat just so they don't trigger their conditions or make themselves sick. And one final thing on this section before we move on. So at the end of each chapter, they do have those little quizzes and like little extras that are supposed to kind of tie in everything that you just talked about in the chapter, right? So let's go ahead and check out the quiz at the end of this chapter that just dealt with some very heavy subject matter, right? Oh, that's right. Which dessert are you? When I saw that, I just honestly could not believe how tone deaf that was. After everything that we just talked about in this chapter previously, despite the fact that a lot of it was self-serving and all the other things that we just went over. This? Are you freaking kidding me? You just talk about all the issues that people might have with food and then, well, what dessert are you? Because that's going to go ahead and solve the problem for people who are actually having serious issues. Oh, that's not going to do it for you? Don't worry. Tess gave us a recipe for banana pudding popsicles. Yeah, don't worry. You might be having issues, but that's because you just didn't know about this recipe for these yummy, yummy popsicles, and now you'll never have issues with food again. I just found it to be so tone deaf, and it honestly kind of gave me a bit of whiplash after all the things that we had just read previously. So, but let's go ahead and move on to the next section. And then next we move on to a section about body standards and exercise and everything to do with bodies, basically. So let's go ahead and take a look here. We've got the wellness industry, with sectors like fitness, nutrition, and weight loss, generates a whopping $5.6 trillion annually. And it's going to blow it up to $8.5 trillion by 2027. Okay, so I am no stranger to hearing them throw figures around like this. Many times within body positivity and fat acceptance, I have heard them throw around the numbers for like the diet and weight loss industries and like the gym industry, or however they want to word it. But those figures they're throwing around are always with a B. They're in billions, not trillions. So I wanted to look up to see what exactly is the wellness industry. What does that all encompass? Because I'm sure it's more than just fitness, nutrition, and weight loss. So let's take a look and see what all encompasses the wellness industry. Okay, and this comes from the Global Wellness Institute, and it's got different categories listed for the different areas of wellness that all make up the wellness industry. So they have mental wellness, wellness tourism, personal care and beauty, wellness real estate. I don't know what that means, but they have it. We've got spas and springs. We've got workplace wellness. We have physical activity. We have healthy eating, nutrition, and weight loss. We have traditional and complementary medicine. We have public health, prevention, and personalized medicine. So it sounds like they're actually counting a fair amount of medical in here as well as going to spas and springs and wellness tourism and whatever the heck wellness real estate is. That's included in these figures as well. So I find it rather curious when they're talking about fitness, nutrition, and weight loss that they couldn't just put those numbers in. They had to include the entire wellness industry to make these numbers sound far more impressive. And the other thing I'll point out is every time I hear these numbers brought up about how much the diet industry is worth or how much gyms make or whatever numbers they want to throw around, they never, ever mention, especially not with the same enthusiasm and with their whole chest the way they do the others, they never mention the food industry. They never mention how much fast food brings in every year. They don't mention how there are like 10 companies that control our entire food supply and they're worth more money than I could even shake a stick at. They never talk about any of that. And then they're going to go ahead and include a whole bunch of other stuff into the wellness industry to make these numbers sound far more impressive. So just some things to keep in mind. And remember, I'm a 41-year-old grown-ass woman having to use my critical thinking skills to see through all of this bullshit. In a book put out for teens and preteens that don't have these same critical thinking skills. And none of us have the sources actually in the book to look any of this up to see where they get these numbers from. But they've just repackaged a whole bunch of body positivity and fat acceptance talking points and then put it in a book for teens and preteens. But let's see what else we've got in here. Now, in the same section, we've got the way you look at your body. Some people on social media take advantage of negative body image. But if you know what to look for, you can weed out messaging that can damage it. Ask yourself these 3 questions before trusting a content creator. Okay, nothing out of the ordinary there, but let's go and check out the questions. Are they qualified to give advice? Okay, well, our friend is also a content creator. So shouldn't we be asking her these questions as well? I mean, Tess, what are your certifications? Are you qualified to be giving us advice? What gives you the balls to write a book telling others how to take care of their body? Because does it look like our friend is qualified to give anyone advice on how to take care of their bodies? And I'm not trying to be mean, but this is a cautionary tale. This should not be our end goal. And look, maybe I'm taking this a little personally because she is talking about content creators, but I'm not even wearing stretch tights, okay? I have on full proper leggings. Thank you, friend. So friend, You'd like to know what my qualifications are? I've lost half my body weight and kept it off for about as long as my daughter's been alive. I've kept 180 pounds off for over 9 years now. Those are my qualifications. I have the experience. What does our friend have? She has no certifications, no qualifications, and clearly she does not have the experience. So I guess, thanks, friend. Now I will definitely question everything that comes out of your mouth because you're not qualified to give anyone advice on this. And the last one, does their content make you feel ashamed about your body in some way? Block, report. Tell the algo to stop showing you this stuff. The person who truly wants to help you live your very best life gives advice that is backed up by science and never makes you feel ashamed of your body. Okay, so yes, we do not need to interact with content that we don't want to. If you don't want to see that content, just block it, keep scrolling, whatever you need to do. There are a lot of ways that you can let the algorithm know that you're not interested. However, I do think it's telling that she goes a step further and says you should report it as well. And that if anyone makes you feel ashamed about your body, to do those things. Because I know within body positivity and fat acceptance, they've made statements that before and afters are harmful. And so many other just innocuous things were harmful to them. So if I were to put up a before and after of my weight loss and show that I have achieved this goal, they might feel ashamed about their own bodies now. And then if so, they'll turn around and not just block it, but also report it. So I thought that was very telling. And there's definitely more like body positivity and fat acceptance language in here as well. So we've got the genetics of size. The wellness machine likes to say that your size is always a direct result of your habits. If you're big, you must wallow around on the couch and eat stacks of cheeseburgers at midnight. No, you eat them at 6 a.m. We already know this. If you're thin, you must run 16 miles a day and guzzle smoothies made of poached chicken and wheatgrass. Like, what kind of extreme thinking is this? First and foremost, that you must go to one extreme or the other. When there are plenty of us that talk about how it could just be a small habit that can make a big impact on your life. So I can't say that I'm surprised that there's this kind of language in here, but there was quite a bit in here. And I want to read one final passage from this section. For example, Tess moves her body 20 minutes a day. And I have to say, if we're going to count up all of the activity that our friend does throughout the day, like getting up, walking around, going to the bathroom, stuff like that, yeah, that seems pretty accurate. I must say that is probably the most accurate statement I read in this entire book. But let's go ahead and check out one final passage of this book. One I might actually agree with our friend on. Beauty from within will always, always, always impact what others think about you. And it will 1,000% impact what you think about yourself, which is the most important thing. I'm glad we finally got that message on page 65. At the very end of the section on loving your outer self, after we have all the advice on how to do our hair, our makeup, our clothes, everything else that apparently was more important to put before that passage in this book. And I think that that kind of sums up exactly how I felt about this book. There was an opportunity. Tess does have a large following. She could have made a big impact with this book. But instead, she chose to bury the most important message of the book halfway through it. After we get done talking about how important it is to love your outer self, then we finally get to the important message of the book. After dealing with all of the body positivity and fat liberation language that is sprinkled throughout this whole book. So, no, I cannot recommend this book to my kids. What bits of good advice I could find in here, they were very generalized bits of it. The bits of advice I could find, the bits of good advice that I could find in here, the bits of good advice that I could find in here, it was very generalized. The bits of good information that I could find in here, it was very generalized and quite frankly, not worth all of the work that it took to find. And the bits of good advice that I could find in here, it was very generalized and just not worth the hunt that I had to go on to find it. but maybe that's just me. Let me know down in the comments below, what do you think? I'm genuinely curious and I love reading all of your responses. And now, time for bonus story time. So, as many of you know, I love doing my 5Ks, and right now I'm in the middle of race season, right? Well, a couple of weeks ago, I had the Pride 5K in my city, and that is the one race out of the year that actually is a night race. So it's the one 5K that my husband and my kids actually come to, and they get to watch me race. And this year we had set up our plan. I was going to head up a little early with the kids, and then my husband was going to meet us up there as soon as he got off work. And then my kids were going to hang out with my husband while I did the race, and they could cheer me on. And like I said, we look forward to it every year, and it's always a great time, right? Well, this race started at 6:30, and about 6:15, I get a hold of my husband, who informs me he's just getting ready to leave work. And I do a little mental math because I know how far away he is and where he has to go. And I realize very quickly he is not going to make it for the start of the race. So I'm looking around, figuring out what I need to do because I can't just leave the kids there, right? So I tell him, okay, well, the kids are going to have to start the race with me. And then he tells me he's going to find me on the course and then bring the kids back, and then they'll just hang out until I'm done, right? So I get the kids over to the start line, and mind you, they've had no prep, no planning, just a quick little pep talk right before we started the race, where I gave them a quick rundown of what to expect, and again, reminded them that Daddy was going to come find them on the course, right? So we start the race. And about 5 to 10 minutes in, my husband gets a hold of us and lets us know that he's here, and we let him know where we're at on the course. Well, he was trying to catch up to us on foot, and, well, eventually he did catch up with us, about a half mile from the finish line. So, well, at that point, I mean, the quickest way back to the car is through the finish line. So for the last half mile, we walked it as a family, and then we all crossed the finish line as a family. And I was telling my husband as we were walking that I know at most of these events, they typically have extra medals, and I was kind of wondering if they might have extra medals for the kids, right? Oh yeah, they did. We crossed the finish line. We all got medals, even my husband, and we all explained to him like, hey, the kids and my husband, they didn't register. This was just a happy accident. But they're like, don't worry, you did the race. So my kids just completed their first 5Ks. I can't even believe this. And the kicker, like I said, this was not planned by any stretch of the imagination. They did this in Crocs. They didn't even have socks on, and they completed their first 5Ks. I am so immensely proud of them. I can't believe they did it. I mean, I know that they could do it because we have taken so many walks all over the neighborhood, all over trails. I mean, we walk all the time, so I know we could do it. But I'll be honest, typically when we go for walks, usually about 2 miles in, they really start kind of petering out. So I was just so immensely proud. They had a blast. So did I. It was amazing. And yes, my time was not quite what I wanted it to be, but we still beat 25 other people, and my kids had never even planned to do this. So I could not be more proud, and just further proof that anyone can participate in these if you want to. You obviously might want to plan and prep and have proper footwear, absolutely. But coming across that finish line and getting these medals with my kids and my husband, absolutely amazing. And cannot wait for next year where we plan to actually do this on purpose. So thanks for sticking around for bonus story time. That is where we will leave things today. I thank you so much for joining me. Please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I will catch you on the next one. Bye. Hi, baby. Guess what? The Guardians are still playing meaningful baseball right now in September. Can you believe that? We won again tonight. Yes. Can you say go Guards? Maybe? You thinking about it? Yes. Oh, hi, sweetheart. Oh. Bye.